sacred exchange?
Yeah, it's on the table.
No, the one about the money.
Yeah, that's on.
Oh, it is?
It's out there, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking,
No, Orthopedist said if you go to physical therapy and do whatever, it'll take about 2 years. and if you do nothing, it'll take about 2 years, and it'll get better. And it did. But every time I would get up, it felt like somebody plunged a knife in my back.
They told me I had one too, but no, what I had is really my, I shrunk a lot too. I shrunk like 6 inches. And when I, yeah, it is a lot. And when I see friends like that I haven't seen for 15 years, I say, what happened to you? Where'd you go? But my back's just shrinking, and it's from the rheumatoid.
Of course, that's very kind.
yes,
Yeah.
because I think it's very
But,
interesting.
you know, I think by the time people are
Well,
60,
thank you. Thank you, Alex.
back,
You're a fun group.
you know,
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to present it to
Yeah.
my committee.
Okay.
Sitting, it was from sitting, and and I did immediately like change my chair.
It's hard to separate the Jews from their food.
Put lumbar support and all of that. And that made a difference, not wood. It's like 20-something years.
yeah, that's great.
A recurrence of that.
Attention. Session 2 is beginning. Please come back to the sanctuary. I know it's hard to separate from the food.
Yeah.
Now I'm better because, yeah, the
So
thing
now we're going
is
to go to the
when
one
I'm
that's the
moving,
PowerPoint.
I'm fine. It's when I've been sitting
Right, you get stiff.
and then I have to get up. You could, oh, okay, well, let's get going. Okay, you dawdler. Brenda, get your butt in there. So I hear Rabbi Chabad is off
Yeah,
the table now for our Torah study, guys.
Yes. I think so.
She said you were chucking the Chabad.
No, we aren't reading their
Oh, the annotated. Oh, I need one.
you know how they
Oh,
try to be
Phil, do you have, may I have one? Thank you.
you know what I really want to do? I want to get to use the rabbi Zoom, rabbi scoop.
Okay, everyone.
It would get cut off at an hour and it
Oh,
would need
yes.
10 minutes to finish the
Yeah,
Torah.
because that's what we use.
Let's continue our exploration. No,
Right.
thank you. But thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone, especially those of you who may be streaming. And thank you to everybody who brought goodies. That was a delicious little repast. And just to remind you, we went through all our food values and thought about their complexity. We thought about having a more expansive view of what kashrut, keeping kosher, can be for the liberal Jew, to think of it as a buffet of choices, and to be approaching it through educated choice, not as something that we as Reform Jews don't do because it is a set, reified, set package, and either you're all in or all out, but rather that it is, when you pull it apart, multifaceted with a lot of different values, sometimes the same food or food choice representing many different values at the same time, and trying to see it as tether points. So you may be a person who your whole life was an ideological vegetarian, but you've never thought about it as a Jewish choice. And maybe that's an entree for you to deepen your relationship with Judaism and to think about and even study more, starting with the chapter on the sacred table and then going from there, to think about how does your ideological choice to be a vegetarian relate to your Judaism, and how can your Judaism reinforce and deepen that choice that you've made. Maybe there are other things in your life that you've been thinking about in terms of dietary practice, trying to have the whatever type of relationship you're trying to have with food, whether it's your health, feeling, having a healthy relationship with food, whether it's ethics, whether it's thinking about feeding the hungry, like wherever you are on that spectrum. And again, we're human beings. We're multifaceted, complicated people, and no one person just stands in one value all the time. We just don't. And that's why this book was written in the way it was written, so that you can ebb and flow with it. So we talked about individual choice, and then we talked about the complexity of what it means to actually eat together. We just ate together. We literally had a buffet where you could pick. There were savory things, there were sweet things. There was fruit, there was nut fruit. There was a lot of different choice there. So what does it mean to come into a space, whether it's your personal home or if it's a communal space? And I will say, part of this is right now we're in a very individuated point in history, meaning that we're in the I, some people refer to this as the I generation, meaning iPhone, in that level of customization. But when you start to get very customized, when you start to only think about the individual, your own personal approach, it really detracts from the communal, right? And we talked before about what it means to have different values, right? And uphold values. To be able to be in relationship and community with others is a value to itself. And in our broader culture, we're starting to talk about this more and more because people have retreated so much into their own homes, their own isolation with their devices, frankly, that we don't think a lot about the communal and what it means to be with other people. Being with other people, as we know from, unfortunately, politics and some of the other things that are very difficult right now, and it's hard to be in community with each other. It's a challenge. It is a challenge. But it is a worthwhile challenge, and one, frankly, that we have to be able to do. And in some ways, the younger generations are now learning, right? We're now trying to teach people what civics are. We're trying to teach the younger generation and ourselves what it means to be in conversation with each other, even when we disagree. So I would say so too with food, and it comes out this way. So I thought it would be interesting to go now to an overview of the Reform platforms. So Reform Judaism, we have, since our beginning roots, and this is, again, the question, let's go to the next one, that we have a tradition of writing these platforms that capture, what do we believe in any snapshot of history. So here we are in 1875, at the very beginnings of Reform Judaism, and this is called the Pittsburgh Platform, obviously because of where it was, ratified. Excuse me. And so we're going to look at these. Brenda has the microphone again. And what I'd like to do is to take turns reading. So we can start with you, Brenda. But if anybody doesn't want to read, just pass the microphone to the next person. You don't need to. Don't feel obligated if you don't want to read aloud. But let's start with 1875. This is important. Hebrew Union College has been opened by then. The Reform movement is a nascent movement. What year is the big immigration wave from Eastern Europe? 1880. But it has already started. It has already started. And there is tension in the American Jewish community between those who especially came from Germany, where they were very educated, very assimilated people, and these Eastern European Jews, like my family, which the German Jews did not hold in high esteem. They saw them as classless peasants. And some of the writings that we all had to study in rabbinic school, talks about them spitting on the floor in the synagogue and really embarrassing their brethren, their siblings of fellow Jews. In this time and period, of course, assimilation is foremost on immigrants' minds. It's always on immigrants' minds, and here we are in a whole other immigration era, needless to say. But the type of assimilation is to blend in, especially with the liberal Jews. But what was exciting about the prospect of Reform Judaism was not that you were going to convert to Christianity to assimilate, but rather that you could maintain a relationship with your Judaism, and you could be educated, you could be scientific, you could be rational. Of course, that implies that Judaism is irrational, right? And that you could have all of this, and that in some ways, what we talked about before, that the synagogue that you would go to on the weekend would be akin to what your Christian neighbors, especially your Protestant neighbors, which was really the majority and also the people that they aspired to be, the people in power, that you would look like them, except you'd go to a slightly different house, and a house of worship. And some of the things that we still do today as Reform Jews, which we take frankly for granted and just like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to look. Here I am standing on a stage. We call it the bima, meaning in Hebrew, the stage. And you are all sitting in pews, right? So these are things, and of course, in this time period, for the most part, men would be taking off their yarmulkes. They would not be using the tallis. The rabbi, a man, would be wearing a black robe, which maybe you still see in many places, but less and less. And so here we are going to explore through the lens of food this historical development, but also looking at where did we start and where did we go. Just to remind you, at the graduation ceremony for Hebrew Union College, they went to the Netherlander Hotel down the street, and the meal was served. And what do we call that meal? The treifa banquet. The treifa banquet. People normally remember that it was like full of ham and pork. It wasn't actually. It was full of oysters, clams, and things like that, which were what people ate back then. And by the way, especially oysters, they thought had huge health benefits. Like we don't really talk about that so much these days. We talk about environmental benefits of oysters and reseeding oysters colonies on coastlines. But that was when a whole bunch of rabbis walked out, and they founded the conservative movement. The conservative movement. But there were a lot of roots before then. For that split. But that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And Carol Balin writes a wonderful article about the contrast between the treifa banquet and what she calls the ham jam, which was another much later, I don't remember which year, I have to think about it, maybe the 1980s, where another meal was served at an auspicious moment in Reform history, and like they had accidentally put bacon bits or something in the salad, and it's a very interesting little historical piece. But now we're just going to do a close reading of these documents. So we're going to start with Brenda over here. If you would like to read, please
Okay.
do.
We hold that all such Mosaic and rabbinical laws as regulate diet, priestly purity and dress originated in ages and under the influence of ideas altogether foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. They fail to impress the modern Jew with the spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our day is apt rather to obstruct than to further modern spiritual elevation.
Okay. So no, don't rush off. Don't rush off. We're coming back. So let's linger on this.
Okay.
And so, friends, what are they saying there about Jewish dietary practice? Like in your own words. Blah. Okay. Okay. Let's tease it out a little bit more. Irrelevant. Doesn't address today's needs, which of course makes it archaic, right? Archaic. This is a thing of the past, not of the 1875 present. What else?
This is the modern world. Modernism doesn't follow all this ancient stuff.
Okay, absolutely.
We're not them, but it's a separation between traditional Judaism and more
Yes, we're a new type of Jew, right? We're doing something new and different. It doesn't say that as explicitly, but that's the implication. So not only that are we not them, meaning the Jews of the past, right? And priestly, right? Priestly is like so removed from any modern Judaism, right? In 1875, even 1875, no one was like, you know, no one was in the temple, right? We were not right? So that's been gone a long, long time. So, but not only that, but the modern Jew is separate. It's not said outrightly, but it talks about the modern Jew. We're different than the Orthodox. Yeah, what else?
And then it will, and it's a barrier to, thanks, that following all this would be more of a barrier to spirituality rather than an enhancement of it.
Exactly. It's a detriment. It's an obstruction, right? To obstruct is a pretty strong statement. You know, kind of calls into question, okay, what have we been doing for the last couple of thousand years where we obstructed from spiritual elevation? But they're saying yes. Okay. Anything else there?
I think the word foreign is important.
Yes, I agree. Want to talk more about that?
Well, in the Torah, we're constantly reminded to love the stranger as ourselves. And here we're saying, no, we're not those people. We are, those ideas are foreign to who we aspire to be. And they get in the way of our mental and our spiritual state. So, well, it's about getting rid of the past.
Okay, so Rabbi Berkson, what we?
I was thought it was separate.
Okay, no.
I said it's.
Why, thanks, Renee. I understand what they're putting on it, but I think the motivating factor is fitting in.
Right, but part of the underscript of fitting in is not being seen as foreign. Right? It's part of they don't want to be seen as the foreigner. Right? They want to literally fit in, meaning that when people look at them and see the way they're behaving in public, that they look like everybody else who's been here, 10 minutes longer. Because that is, the difference between being the stranger and being the foreigner in this country. It's generation, but you know what I mean. So they don't want to, and under the influence of ideas, right? That's also influence that you can almost hear the critique against Judaism, right? That we don't fit in because we follow this influence. That's very separate. They're saying, no, we're not under this influence. We're not foreign. Like, you can hear the argument behind all of this. Yeah, of course.
I think you could correlate that with some of the verbiage that's going on in our country now about dual loyalty and not being a true American if you're Jewish, that your loyalty is elsewhere. And the assimilation back then in the 19th century was, you're an American now, act like one. Don't be Jewish.
Yeah. I would say, you know, that othering, that saying that you're the stranger, this is perennial themes when talking about, you know, immigration. So, Brenda, you can also share the responsibility of running around with the microphone if you want. You
I
know?
just want to make one thing. It's like they're not being validated.
Yeah, right. And it is that sense of choose this alignment with this past, this irrational stuff, or update and become modern. And by the way, to further modern spiritual elevation, right? So they're focused on not ritual, not theological, like spiritual, even especially today, spiritual like has this branding. You know, it's a certain very middle of the road, not you know, rocking the boat too much. Spiritual elevation, right? Very parav, very like in the middle, nothing. Okay, so. Okay.
I want to ask, so there, a group that's trying to sort of ignite excitement and engagement, and growing, and you know, starting up and growing, has an incentive to distinguish itself from others. You know, it's a kind of tribalism in its own way. Was there, you know, sort of a sort of vested interest, you know, amongst a group of leaders to jumpstart the reform movement and stuff?
Well, yes, absolutely. So they saw the opportunity because, again, they saw assimilation. They wanted to be university educated, very educated people. And they were scientific thinkers. They were rationalists. And they wanted to find a way to retain their Judaism and their connection to Judaism and still have everything. So what is known as Reform Judaism today, what they created was a path forward that I mean, I think we all agree is a good path forward. I mean, here we are, right? Here we are, you know, and what we're going to see is that evolution. But what they were trying to achieve was they were faced with a choice of basically, if you wanted to be university trained and to be rational and scientific, you basically had to leave Judaism. And I mean, people did stay in, but they didn't mesh together. And they were faced with this challenge, and they decided to create New Judaism. This is not a new thing in Judaism to create New Judaism, okay? And that is really important to know. That since biblical times, we have always had splinters and different ways and shaping, and thank God, because otherwise, when the second temple was destroyed, we would have been done, right? Unless we moved away from the temple in Jerusalem, led by the priests, when it was destroyed, we would have been done and a footnote in history. And instead, we are still here because there were people who were already part of our evolution, already seeing, even before the destruction of the Second Temple, a different way forward, which was rabbinic Judaism. And this idea that we could pray with words and not animal sacrifice. So we have always evolved, we have always changed, we've always assimilated from the things around us and brought that into the change. So none of this is new, but this is this newest venture. If that makes sense. Okay.
The rejection from the traditionalists, was it so strong that we literally would have felt rejected from Judaism?
Well, they were also intellectual purists. So, you know, they may have been able to stay in and, like, when they were in the Jewish world, just do it, you know, the way the traditionalists did, and then in the university world, do it the scientific way. But they were also intellectual purists and felt that they wanted to do everything with that lens of intellect, training, and they also most honestly wanted to look like their neighbors. So they didn't want to be dressing like the Jews, they didn't want to have the beard, they didn't want to have the payas, they didn't want to be in the black suit, and they wanted to look like their neighbors and go to university, which was also banned to them unless they could pass and blend in. So it was from both sides. like the impulse to change and evolve and create what they created was from both sides of that equation. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Notice the big skip in date, 1875 now to 1937. I don't need to tell you what's in the background in Europe in 1937. Okay, so but let's just see where they are in terms of their relationship to food.
Columbus Platform 1937. Yep. Judaism as a way of life requires, in addition to its moral and spiritual demands, the preservation of the Sabbath, festivals, and holy days, the retention and development of such customs, symbols, and ceremonies as possess inspirational value, the cultivation of distinctive forms of religious art and music, and the use of Hebrew, together with the vernacular in our worship and instruction.
Okay. Okay, so where does that leave us? Leave us in terms of food or anything else? What do we see now? Obviously, there's more specificity here. We'll just point out. One of the other things we'll see is that as time passes, we also get more verbose in these platform statements. We'll see that especially in the next jump. But here we have more specificity. So let's talk about that. What do you see?
Looks like they're getting a little more traditional with talking about preserving Sabbath, festival, and the holy days.
They do, right? Maybe a little more comfort level.
And Hebrew, yeah.
Yes, but also with Hebrew together with the vernacular, right? Right. So, but they mention Hebrew. Yes. Yes, Rabbi. Okay.
Given the time frame of this,
yes,
I'm wondering whether there was sort of a social justice piece that people are dying or Jews are being persecuted.
Yes.
In Europe, and why, for us to do our part, we need to be like the Jews here and look or those Jews and look like them.
So just to remind you, the other one's 1875. The Eastern European Jews were already flooding into Europe, but the height of that flood was, of course, the 1880s. Then, of course, we had isolationism and our immigration and all that. But by 1837, people are very aware of what's happening in Europe, and people are making their way out of Europe. And so that is definitely part of it, as you said. Okay, some other comments? Just to, what else we see? By the way, notice the emphasis, of course, in addition to its moral and spiritual demands. Again, they're prioritizing the non-ritual. Notice that the moral and the spiritual. And what's interesting is in the other, we didn't really hear about the moral. We heard about priestly, the contrast of that. But modern spiritual elevation was the goal in 1875, and now we're hearing the moral voice coming forward, which of course is one of the great hallmarks of Reform Judaism today. So we see that expansion.
As opposed to it being more general and open, this is so, like you said, specific in demands made of you, what you have to aspire to do in terms of ritual acts and customary acts to be considered part of Judaism.
Yes.
It seems to have like a big tent feel to it. Like this was a trying time, I guess, for all Jews. Bringing everybody together.
Yeah, there's something, a little bit of everything in there for people, right? You can see like there's something on this list that you'd probably hook into and feels good to you. Again, they're not really emphasizing ritual, except for they do mention Sabbath festivals and holy days. That's always had a certain cultural draw, a certain family dimension, communal dimension, from the food perspective, a certain taste and sound and sensory attraction to it. So important. of course, they don't mention food directly, but customs, symbols, ceremonies, that's all kind of implicit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is sort of the beginning of the notion that people could make up their own minds as to what they want to follow and to what degree. So on the phrase you were just looking at, development of customs, symbols, and ceremonies as possess inspirational value.
Yes.
So who decides what's inspirational and who assesses the value? And if it's each individual, then you're free to begin to make those choices. And this is the platform that those of us who grew up in Reform congregations would have been operating under.
Yes, absolutely. I love what you said. And the challenge to this, of course, is what if somebody, okay, so this is pick and choose. This is like certainly the 1960s, that's going to be like the mantra, pick and choose. Educated choice is already, coming out of this, and you see that in here. But what happens if your educated choice leads you to orthopraxy, small o? What would have happened in 1937 if someone showed up in their synagogue and said, you know what, I read this really carefully and I gave this a lot of thought, and I've been inspired, right? Inspirational value. I find an talis and a yarmulke, and I'm going to put on tefillin in the synagogue, not on Shabbat, of course, on whatever, Wednesday mornings, whatever. Would that have gone over okay? Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of synagogues in America, if you showed up with a yarmulke, you would have been told to take it off. A talis, take it off. And I'm not only, and that's important to note, there was variety even back then. But nobody wanted you to actually be inspired, have inspirational value to make orthodox choices. But you do see choice here, and an individuated choice.
They also talk about the cultivation of religious art and music.
Yeah.
So creating our own modes of worship, our own art, and being inspired to do that.
Yes, and that also means you're stepping away from the Masorah, the tradition, right? And again, modernizing, so that your music now sounds more like what your neighbor does down the street at their Protestant congregation, and less like the old chazan, from Europe. Yep.
I also get the sense, in contrast to the 1875 platform, which seemed very focused on assimilation, that this is anti-assimilation. This is basically saying we need to maintain our traditions and have some distinctiveness to who we are and what we do.
I wouldn't say it's anti-assimilation, but there's definitely a sense of preservation, and to be able to preserve while modernizing, and then have that tension. And certainly, again, in 1937, they're going to be aware of what's happening in Europe, and certainly what the waves of immigration have done to Europe, and the destruction that most people won't fully understand the impact of that destruction, but they do know of it. So they see what is happening. So I agree with you, but it's still in tension of the preservation versus modernity, where Reform Judaism has always sat in that tension. But that's good. I'm definitely yes. Let's look at the centenary perspective, the next one. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Judaism emphasizes action rather than creed as the primary expression of a religious life, the means by which we strive to achieve universal justice and peace. Reform Judaism shares this emphasis on duty and obligation. Our founders stressed that the Jew's ethical responsibilities, personal and social, are enjoined by God. The past century has taught us that the claims made upon us may begin with our ethical obligations, but they extend to many other aspects of Jewish living, including creating a Jewish home centered on family devotion, lifelong study, private prayer and public worship, daily religious observance, keeping the Sabbath and the holy days, celebrating the major events of life, involvement with the synagogue and community, and other activities which promote the survival of the Jewish people and enhance its existence. Within each area of Jewish observance, Reform Jews are called upon to confront the claims of Jewish tradition however differently perceived, and to exercise their individual autonomy, choosing and creating on the basis of commitment and knowledge.
Okay.
So this
Thank
is real
you.
choice.
Okay, so 1976, you know, all of us in one way, shape, or form are kind of experts on this era because we lived through it. So what is in the backdrop of American life at this point, 1976? Where are our cultural values? What's the zeitgeist, as one might say? Vietnam War. Watergate. I heard someone say that we've just come through the 1960s, so what does that mean to have come through? Civil rights.
It's also the time when there was more do-it-yourself Judaism. There were those books, did
Michael
author
Strasfield.
Which one?
The Jewish Catalog.
Yeah, the
Michael
Jewish
Strasfield.
Catalog 1 and 2.
And 3.
And 3, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so where does the do-it-yourself Judaism kind of movement, meaning this was a set of books that were, you know, I still have them on my shelf, I'm sure everybody does, that, you know, I remember our classmate, my beloved friend, Leon Morris, saying how he bought that like in high school and like went through it and made every single thing, including like his own shofar, and his mother let him like bring home this ram's horn that was completely like fresh off the animal and boil it in his house, and the stench of dead animal like lingered for weeks in his house. But what was going on culturally in America? We know the civil rights movement, but what was associated, what was the positive side of the civil rights movement besides civil rights?
Women's rights as well.
Well, women's rights, but also there was a cultural explosion of pride in one's identity, that assimilation now actually looked a very different way. The melting pot was becoming the mosaic. The goal of American life before the 1960s was to everyone blend in and look the same in terms of especially the WASP aesthetic, because again, those were the people in power, the gatekeepers, that's what you wanted to be. No matter who you were or what religion, what identity, what color your skin was, that is what you wanted to emulate. By the 1960s, there was a radical shift, especially by 1976, that people were celebrating their identities. Again, that could come out in many different ways. Black is beautiful, the women's empowerment movement, all of that. And we're still living on that roller coaster of that balance of identity, what's now sometimes proudly said and sometimes negatively said as identity politics. So here we are. And part of that was suddenly celebrating and using and going back and diving into whatever your culture, religion, whatever it was, your identity, and finding the past and relearning it in many cases, and finding the people who had preserved it all along, and now embracing it. So things that were ritual before were things we wanted to distance ourselves from, and now suddenly ritual was where we wanted to be. And so the question became, how do you do that through a reform lens? And this was part of the answer. Okay, so what else are we hearing in this?
Bob and then Margie.
I like the first line. Judaism emphasizes action rather than creed.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you do and not what you say.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it does feel like a little bit of a diss of those other platforms, right? And now like, no, we're going to put in all this ritual stuff because actually it isn't just about the head, but it's about the whole, right? And again, that makes the head made a lot of sense for the other two platforms because that's who those people were. They were rationalists. They were all about the intellect and science, and they stripped it down to that very ideological approach. And here, with the fuel of the general zeitgeist, they are in a very different headspace too, in that, as we would say today.
So two things. I think 1976, the state of Israel going through so many changes through war, and the prospect of peace with the leadership, the American leadership, with the Israeli leadership, all the different machinations with Sadat and Begin and all that stuff. And then also the more comfort in interfaith relationships and sharing of traditions and the Chrismukkah kind of thing, and the idea of Jews being proud of their heritage, even if they marry somebody who's not Jewish, but the synagogues being more accepting of people of different faiths coming together, and there being more interfaith celebrations. You know, I was a little young back then, but I can see that as coming out of the 70s, where you said there's pride in your heritage and not hiding who you were.
Absolutely. Reform Judaism's full embrace of interfaith families is not going to come exactly yet. And it's interesting because I think this Shabbat is the Yortzeit of Alexander Schindler, right? And I think that was one of the, and there's a wonderful new book about him and some study materials. And of course, he really led that movement and helped us really embrace it as a movement, very importantly, very notably. But you're right, the roots are here. The roots are here. They aren't completely there yet in full iteration. And I want to, you of course pointed to Israel and Israel's history in 1976. I just want to put a point on that and say there is a state of Israel, right? In 1937, there was not a state of Israel. So yes, there's an established state of Israel. It's been already gone through a lot, as it will continue to. And there is hope looming for peace. We all know kind of where that story went. And those are all important. Well said. So thank you. Bill.
So parlaying the commitment to Israel was for life to be centered around the synagogue, and also, you know, raising your kids Jewish, you know, sending them to Hebrew school and stuff like that.
Yes. You know, again, looking at the broader movements in America, you know, part of the Black is Beautiful movement was for people from Africa in this country to start looking at those roots, going on pilgrimage back to Africa to see where they came from, to understand the difference, not just that they were an African American, but they were from Nigeria, they were from Kenya, wherever they came from, to understand what that meant, to understand the tribes that they were from. Like, that is part of what's happening in this time period among our neighbors. And so, you know, connection to Israel, state of Israel to actually feel connected to, like, that's also part of, again, what we're seeing in this. You know, differently perceived, by the way, however differently perceived, this understanding that the reform movement is an expansive movement, that it's not a cookie cutter, that there are going to be a lot of different people in our movement, understanding that reality. This is not going to be the early founders of Reform Judaism, who, of course, there was always differentiation, there was always people with different approaches, there were people who were Zionists, people who weren't Zionists, but there's going to be a lot more toleration for this idea that when we sit together in community, that there's going to be a spectrum of belief. There are going to be people who grew up Orthodox, and that was no longer the right fit for them, but are here because this spoke to them. There are going to be people who've joined our community who had nothing before they came here. There are people who are along the ride with the people they love who are Jewish. There are people who are converting to Judaism for many different reasons. There are people who you know, are third generation Reform Jews. There's going to be a huge spectrum of people, and how they relate to Judaism and Reform Judaism is going to really differ. So we're starting to see that in the community.
I also think this is the generation and era of new Jewish music with guitars,
yes,
and having sing-alongs and camps and youth groups and people participating in Judaism in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
And the prayer book, which came
Oh,
out
that's
in
true.
1976, had, I want to say, at least 7, maybe 10
10.
different services with different themes.
Yep, absolutely. And that idea that that could all exist in one prayer book with the, again, perceived differences, right? So again, we're here to talk about food. Do you see food in here? What would this statement say about food? Yeah, regulate diet, right? And that's interesting. That's number 1 there, right?
Yeah.
Exercise, right? So you can see it indirectly, not directly, but we do see it because it's going into this basket of ritual practice, especially things that look very Jewish, look very, very Jewish. Okay. Okay, we're going to skip now to 1999, centenary statement for principles for Judaism. Sorry. So here what I'm doing is, I have no idea why I have 3rd draft, 4th draft, 5th draft, and frankly that kind of worries me. And I'm wondering if I mislabeled these. Okay. That's a good question. I'm going to go with that it's correct. I'm going to go with it's correct. So I don't know why I have the 3rd draft first.
Okay. 3rd draft. As we strive.
You're right. It goes to 5th. Okay, I thought I had 2. Never mind. I panicked. Whew, I panicked. No, you're right. I have the oldest to the. Yes, I thought I had something out of order and I didn't. Okay, we're all good. Back to our normal show here. Okay, so 3rd draft. Let's look at them. Who's going to read?
Ellen.
Oh, thank you.
As we strive to admit a greater degree of holiness into our lives and those of our communities, we commit ourselves to some mitzvot that have long been hallmarks of Reform Judaism. And in the spirit of standing at Sinai with all other Jews, we know we may feel called to other mitzvot new to Reform Jewish observance. In the presence of God, we may each feel called to respond in different ways, some by offering traditional or spontaneous blessings, others by covering our heads, still others by wearing the talit or tefillin in prayer. Some will look for ways to reveal holiness in our encounters with the world around us, others to transform our homes into a mikdash me'at, a holy place in miniature. Some of us may observe practices of kashrut, to extend the sense of kedusha into the acts surrounding food, and into a concern for the way food is raised and brought to our tables.
Okay, so we're going to go through, several drafts here. We're going to see if we have time to actually look at all of them. And so what do you see here? I don't want to spend too much time on each one. I want to get the flow of how they're different. Food, right? Kashrut, it's mentioned. It's there. We haven't seen that since 1875. What else is notable?
More traditional practices.
Yeah, way more. Woo, right? Wow. Again, Rabbi Richard Levy, big hand in this, huge hand. There has been a neo-Orthodox small o traditionalist part of the Reform movement that has been growing for decades, and I think it peaked. It peaked in the early 2000s, and it has been dwindling. I'm not plummeting, but dwindling. And Rabbi Edelman and I were ordained in 1997. Y'all were 95. And so we're all the same rabbinic generation. These people who were more on this traditionalist side were our teachers, and certainly Larry Kushner was your rabbi,
Yep.
and he was part of this movement for sure. Also, the Neo-Hasidic movement.
Yeah, neo-Hasidic.
Which is intertwined with the neo-traditionalist ritual movement. And And, you know, if you had come to Hebrew Union College, especially New York, when we were students, you would have seen a lot of students, and certainly our teachers who are influential in our lives, our rabbis, with talit, with kippah, with tefillin. And I go to the campus a couple of times a year for different, you know, parts of my responsibilities as executive director of the Women's Rabbinic Network. And it's not the same. I mean, there still are a handful of people with tefillin, certainly a lot of ta'alises, not as many kippot, especially on women, as there used to be. And there are changes, as every generation gets to have changes. So what I would say is this reflects kind of like the upper peak, and we're going to see how it kind of gets honed down, because these are usually written by small working committees and led by very ideological people. The Central Conference of American Rabbis tries to bring together leading voices of different types. They try to have nice diversity to capture that snapshot. There are going to be some very prominent thinkers who really have a hand in this. And I've sat on time of similar committees, not this committee. And what I would say is it's also, you know, who has the time to write, who has the, you know, who has the talents and all that. Then it comes back to the committee, then it's honed by other people. But by the time it gets in front of the entire Central Conference of American Rabbis to vote on it, it's gone through a lot of iterations, both publicly and privately, and it is going to be honed down to something radically different. But what's kind of fun here, and you know, is to be able to see the difference. Okay, so anything else you want to point out before we move on? Yeah.
Well, to follow up on what you were saying, the difference here between this and 1875 is that the fear of being perceived as foreigners has gone.
It's gone, not one iota.
So all of that has disappeared. And so now the possibility of being seen differently, of walking on the street with a kippah, with a, you know, talis on, all of that seems acceptable. Now you can actually talk about it. And also, of course, you've given the explanation that there are going to be 3 or 4 or 5 different or more different iterations of this before it gets winnowed down into a final statement. But the multiple drafts also speak to multiple points of view.
It does.
So there's a whole lot more being said than the single more, what appeared to be a more unified vision in, you know, 100 years earlier.
Absolutely, well said. You know, again, you know, today we talk about big tent Judaism. We talk about the Reform movement spreading that big tent over this very broad set of practices and approaches and ideologies, and non-ideologies. You know, many people show up in the Reform community, or at least identify as Reform. You know, if we went around here and asked everyone their journey to Reform Judaism, we'd hear a lot of beautiful different stories. But if we went to like the local mall and randomly stop people and be like our brethren who say, "Are you Jewish?" and, you know, ask people like, what kind of Jewish are they on a Saturday in a mall, by the way, right? People would very often say, "I'm Reformed." They may today also just say, "Oh, I'm just culturally Jewish, I'm just Jewish," like other forms. But especially, you know, in this time period of the turn of the millennia, 1999, people are going to say they're Reform even if they don't belong or step foot in a Reform synagogue, because that is their identity, because they think it is a synonym with being secularized. Or they do feel a loose connection, right? That goes back to the food values, right? There are a lot of people who, "Oh, I'm a bagel Jew," right? Actually I eat matzah on Passover when my family gets together and has a nice festive meal, but that's all we do. We don't open a Haggadah. Like, or we open a Haggadah a little bit and then we get bored and then we eat. Like, whatever it is. So there are a lot of different ways to be Jewish. And so they're trying to create a statement that holds a lot of that. Not all of it, but a lot of that. So, yeah, Grace.
I guess I'm wondering, do you think there were things operated within the temple and what was sort of put forth in the synagogue for people at these different times.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to think in the 70s, the 80s, like through there, and I don't have such a strong sense of that. I think some of the congregations were basically part Reform, part conservative, and I don't remember huge differences in what was emphasized in or how the services were done, or, I mean, maybe I missed the nuances.
Yeah, I mean, there have been huge differences. I mean, even in 1999 or looking back, I mean, there would have been differences even as there are today in terms of, how you relate to Israel, egalitarianism, the role of men and women, the actual prayers, what prayer book you used. There have been, whether people wear a tallis, kippah, is the rabbi wearing a black robe on Friday night, and no kippah, kind of tallis, like the whole gamut. Kashrut in the social hall. When's Hebrew school? Is it on Saturday? Is it on Sunday? There would have been a lot of difference throughout the Reform movement, even in 1999. So, yeah.
I also noticed that there's a tremendous amount of Hebrew that's not translated, so that there's a big re-involvement with talit or tefillin or mikdash ma'at.
Yeah, they try to translate that one because that's less common. But
kashrut
holiness,
and
kedusha, right? This has a different feel to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's skip forward because I want to make sure we look at some of the other things
like to read
here.
the fourth draft.
Let's look at number 4. Okay, who's going to read now? Yep.
We may build a shelter on Sukkot and a shelter for the homeless.
One more, honey.
We may open our hearts to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we may open our homes to welcome holiday guests. We may seek to put into our mouths the food that match our religious and societal commitments, and we may seek to keep from our mouths any words of cruelty or gossip. We may cover our challah in the presence of Shabbat, and we may cover our heads in the presence of God. We may discover rituals now unknown, which, in the spirit of Jewish tradition and Reform innovation, will bring us closer to God, to Torah, to our families, and to our people.
Okay, just to remind you, I'm just giving you snippets. I'm trying to hone on things that I think relate to food, or directly or indirectly in all of these. So, you can knock your socks off and go find the full drafts and all that and study them. So it would be a whole other class to itself. But what do we see here? Very little more poetic, right? Yeah.
It's like a balance between religious and moral. That I'm not sure if it's being presented as a choice or as commandments.
Yeah. And that is one of the tensions behind all of these statements of what is mitzvah, what is commandedness, and where as Reformed Jews do we stand here? We talk about educated choice. We ask the question: is there anything that's commanded? Usually, from a Reformed point of view, we land on those things that are ethical. Of course, what is ethical? That's a whole debate to itself because ethics are deeply debated when you come trying to decide what our commandments are and what they mean. That's why we've been around for thousands of years and have volumes and volumes of writing. But yes, we have a foot in either camp here, and we're trying to figure out that balance, the tension, and what to do, because throughout our movement there are going to be people who are lopsided in both of those.
No, I was just going to point out the sense of community, and that we aren't Jews unless we find community. So the sukkah and our food that we share with our community, and our Jewish traditions that may take us out of our own personal family. When I read our families and our people, it's outside of like these walls or even our own family.
Do you think it means that we have the option of picking and choosing in what manner we want to be a Reformed Jew? By we may, like, well, maybe I'll do this, but maybe I won't be doing that one.
Yeah, the may is a little wishy, right?
Okay.
And definitely in here, you're starting to see the dropping of hierarchy, right? 1999, that's the other thing you're seeing here is this dropping of hierarchy. Even though I'm here on the bima talking literally down to you, I'm not trying to talk down to you, you know what I mean? But I'm physically doing that by 1999, not only our theology, like not only is our theology narrowed, that sense of God being above and hierarchical and patriarchal being closer to us theologically, but also our leaders, our rabbis. So the people, the people, are much more empowered to make your own choice. Much more to make your own choice. And that's always been part of Reform Judaism, except they actually didn't want you to do it in many ways. In 1937 and in 1875, they didn't actually want you to make your own choice. What they really wanted you to do is say, okay, I'll make the choices and put them down for you, and maybe within this like smaller menu, you now have choices. But this idea of individual choice is now, right? And at the same time, you're right that somebody had said about community, like they're still trying to maintain community. So some of the challenges that we have today in 2025, they had too. And Judaism has always had over the thousands of years, which is how do you maintain community while you're making these change and innovation and all that. So, but the may is kind of, right? And this trying to link the ritual with the ethical and see both sides of it. It's beautiful and poetic, right? There are a lot of people. I know back here in the back row, yellow shirt.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm Maddie Cow. Hi. I see this as I see this as the restrictions and the prohibitions have been loosened up, that we have a green light to make our own path, but ultimately, in this last sentence, we don't see the may, we say will. So what's forthcoming is, given our path, we will be closer to God. We will be closer to Torah. We will hopefully be closer with our families and to our Jewish people as a community.
Yeah.
Will.
Yes.
Will. It's forthcoming.
Yeah. And by the way, the combination God, Torah is usually, what's the third one? Israel. And here they don't give us Israel, they say our families and to our people, which is interesting in itself. The other thing, we may discover rituals now unknown. This is past the era. This comes out of the 60s and really of the 70s. But by the 1970s, by the 1980s, by the 90s, the idea of innovative ritual being part of Reform Judaism is well established. So they know more innovation will keep coming and coming. And we know that.
I just want to ask, what's a new word that has never been used in any of the other platforms? Who's finally appearing?
Yes.
God.
Yes. Yep. Thank you, Rabbi.
If I could share, so when Rabbi Mary and Rabbi Renee were assistant rabbis at Temple Emmanuel in Westfield, Chief Rabbi was Rabbi Charles Kroloff, who took as a cause célèbre housing the homeless. So basically for 2 weeks at Christmas, when churches couldn't do it, we would house the homeless. We built a giant bathroom and shower facilities in the temple. The school block was occupied by lots and lots of homeless families. And as a congregation, we cook 3 meals a day for this whole group of homeless folks.
Part of the Interfaith Church Council.
And Rabbi Kroloff wrote a book.
Yes, he did.
On this. And so connecting Sukkot with a housing, with sheltering the homeless, kind of really interesting. A new ritual, it was a ritual at Temple Emmanuel. A new tradition, yeah.
Well said. Let's jump to number 5. Who would like to read? Time is ticking here. So if you thought, I have not read yet, this is my big chance. This is it. Susan.
Hi, Susan St. Lifer.
Okay, draft 5.
We are committed continually to study the whole array of mitzvot and individually to embrace those that can shape our lives. We believe that this involvement with Torah will lead us to some mitzvot long observed in Reform Judaism and to others, both ancient and contemporary, that speak to the unique context of our time.
Okay, definitely brought it down a few notches. At the same time, being more explicitly clear, right? Less detailed, but very clear, and rolling all of those things that were said before with such detail now into 2 sentences. Okay, I think we should just jump to the final adopted in Pittsburgh. That's okay, because I still want to get to.
Sure. We are committed to the ongoing study of the whole array of mitzvot and to the fulfillment of those that address us as individuals and as a community. Some of those mitzvot, sacred obligations, have long been observed by Reform Jews. Others, both ancient and modern, demand renewed attention as the result of the unique context of our times.
Okay. What do you all see there? That's the final. A lot of room for interpretation. No God.
A lot of
there.
mitzvot.
Not there. Again, this are just snippets.
Lots of mitzvot doing for others.
Yeah. Sacred obligations. That's a nice way, newer translation of mitzvot, right? Not commandedness, sacred obligations. That's a kind of like nice, Reformed Jews don't, for the most part, don't like being commanded, being told to do things. People in 99 don't like to be told to be doing things. Okay, sacred obligations. That kind of feels both ways a little bit. They hit the sweet spot. Revisit. Yeah, it's in continuity, and it's showing ancient and modern, and again this weird irony that we sit in Reform Judaism. We're part of the ongoing continuity of Judaism, but we're doing something new, right? Like holding both of those at the same time. Old but new. Let's look at text number 6. This is from the statement of principles for Reform Judaism. This is an earlier section than the things we've been focusing on as we went through those iterations. This is part of the final, but I wanted to make sure you look at it because it's an earlier framing. Who would like to read again? You may leave here today saying, I really wanted to read.
Sure. We respond to God daily through public and private prayer, through study, and through the performance of other mitzvot, sacred obligations, ben Adam la makon, to God, and ben Adam la chevero, to other human beings.
Okay, well done. So lots of God there, right? Lots of God. Also shows where we are theologically, not afraid to discuss God. Again, not surprising given the rabbis who led this effort, and that they are very ideologically trying to publicly embrace the concept of God. And I wanted you to look at this because before in terms of all the kashrut food stuff, this is the theme I've been bringing out throughout the afternoon, that you have this buffet of choices, you have individual choice. We're diving into very ancient rituals and ethical and spiritual practices, but we're also talking about it through a modern lens. We're talking about pesticides. We're talking about our local feeding programs, but we're also talking about the separation of milk and meat. So we make these individual choices. We think about it as individuals, but then we have to be in community with each other. So the first is our being in dialogue and in relation to Judaism, and if you believe it theologically, with God directly, with our tradition directly, with the way you were raised, your family of origin, wherever that may be, Jewish or not Jewish. That all goes into that mix of what you're doing, but then you have a household that might include other human beings, and then certainly public spaces and communal eating that involve other people. And in the Jewish community, that takes many different forms. That's your synagogue, that's your oneg, that's your JCC, that's your local feeding program and kosher feeding program. Like there are a lot of different, that's your Jewish day school. There are a lot of different dimensions. That's your camp where you send your kids or your grandkids. So there are a lot of different dimensions to what it means to eat communally and to be ben adam l'chavero, to be in relationship with one another. So I wanted you to see that. Any thoughts, comments before we go to the next text? Okay, so there's some commentary here. I was on the committee as a young rabbi or much younger rabbi, to write the commentary. I don't remember, frankly, why in 2004 we were writing a commentary 5 years later on this. I don't know if they just, like, huge procrastination, delays, other priorities. But, you know, I remember being called in and invited. Some of the work was already underway, but there you go. So here's a focus on mitzvot. So basically what the commentary did was follow like a Talmudic or even standard commentary on the Torah, where they'll focus on different phrases or words and then give a commentary that helps us have more of a thought process about it. So here is mitzvot. I've talked a little bit about that in the background, so nothing here should be, you know, shocking. But
Rabbi Bergson has the mic.
yes,
I see
he is,
you.
Rabbi.
Mitzvot. The Hebrew root of this word is tzadi vav he, usually translated command. Since its inception, the Reform movement has wrestled with the classic notion of God commanding us. It seems so frontal, so authoritarian, so hierarchical. But if God is in dialogue with us, perhaps we hear God's commands as though God were calling out to us in words that a beloved human being in our lives might use. It is very important to me that you do this, awaiting our response. We may respond to many of these calls by taking on these sacred obligations, building them into our lives. To others, we may respond, we need to dialogue more. To others, we may respond, I cannot do this act. In terms of my present moral or communal understanding, it seems meaningless or even wrong. And perhaps God responds as our beloved might. Let's keep the conversation going.
Let's just stop there.
I thought that was
Beautiful, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of mushy. Any comments, thoughts about that? Rabbi, you seem like you're...
I like how it makes God personal.
Yeah. Microphone. Rabbi Bergson likes the way it makes God personal. It's very intimate, right? As you might with your beloved, right? It's gorgeous. I did not write that, don't worry. Like, I don't remember who on the committee wrote that. Definitely not me at that time. But it is touching. Okay, so given the time, let's skip to the next one. Ben Adam LaMakom. Maybe one of your final opportunities to read today.
Ben Adam Bein Adam L'Haviro.
No,
Oh,
we're at
I'm
Makom.
sorry, I'm on
Makom.
the wrong
Yeah.
page.
Yep.
Wait, I'm sorry. Bein Adam L'Makom. While early Reform Judaism divided the mitzvot into moral laws and ritual ones, the classic division is between mitzvot bein Adam l'makom and mitzvot between humans, beings, and God, literally the place, and mitzvot bein lahaviro, between one human being and another. In the first category are such mitzvot as prayer, talit, tefillin, kashrut, many aspects of Shabbat and holidays, the avoidance of idolatry and blasphemy, the study of Torah. In the second category are such mitzvot as the obligation to give one's employees and rest on Shabbat, to do justice and kindness in the world, to treat workers fairly. But the Kabbalist, Isaac Luria, urged us to say before we begin to pray, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the mitzvah is to remember that we were strangers in Egypt. Informs not only mitzvot to treat today's strangers kindly, but also the mitzvah to remember that God freed us from Egypt. In Adam L'Chaviro, we see that Tselem Elohim, the image of God.
Okay, so thank you. Again, remember, this is the commentary. This is not the main statement. This was not approved by the Central Conference of American Rabbis as a legal body where they voted on it, and it was sealed and goes down into history. This was a committee that was in partnership between the CCAR and the URJ. So it had rabbis and educators. I don't recall a cantor on the committee. Today they definitely would have put a cantor on the committee. And it was just like 4 or 5 of us, and we were tasked with bringing out some commentary so that people could teach this. This was like became a printed, they used to do those nice like booklets with the cover, and you would bring them to your congregation, and for whatever 10 weeks you would all sit around studying it, poring over it like it was the Talmud, and think about all these different principles and what they're trying to say, and other things. So here, needless to say, and what was nice about this is we reached into the other drafts and brought out some of the pointed language that was lost in the final copy, but was, certainly heard behind the scenes of the talit, the tefillin, the kashrut, is actually there, and they're discussing. The Kabbalist Isaac Luria, like you can almost feel like the early Reform rabbis of 1875 rolling over in their graves, clutching their stomachs in pain, of like this irrationalist, a Kabbalist. That is definitely squarely on the shoulders of Rabbi Larry Kushner and his friends, his cohort, of teaching us all how to study these people and actually care what they had to say, and feeling comfortable with them being part of our body of tradition and to learn from them. So anything else here that you would want to point out? Yeah, Phil.
I'm seeing a pretty familiar phrase and just thinking of it through food. Basically treating strangers kindly. It maybe is being open-minded about all the different ethnic foods that we have available to us. Mm-hmm. And God freeing us from Egypt, I mean, the image of matzah, is front of mind, right? As we didn't have time to bake before we left.
Yeah, and the imperative of the ethics and seeing that ethics, and it be very clearly, ethics and rituals, moral law and ritual law are not two separate things. That's the supposition here, that you cannot talk about them as separate things, that they're actually intertwined. and of course you said it earlier that when you read these texts, like in the minute that we're standing in, the historical minute in America, moment in America, in terms of immigration, like some of this feels like it was written for today, right? And you know, in 1999, there was a tightening of immigration going on, but nothing next to today, needless to say. But we were aware of it. So.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? I just love the fact that it ties the Torah into ethics and to modern life.
Absolutely. So I'll end with the question for you to leave with. Do liberal Jews, do Reform Jews keep kosher? If they want. We may, right? We may. I hope that today, as we explored all of this, that you felt connected to something from our tradition. I hope that you'll walk out with that and that you'll carry it with you, that you'll continue to think about it, and that it creates an entree for you into a deeper dive into your Jewish tradition, your Jewish journey, and that it deepens your food practices, and that you see value in both ritual and in ethical and in spiritual, in all those things, and to know that they're not so separate from each other. Thank you.
I just want to remind you of one of the things that Rabbi Zamore said earlier, in that we're not only Jewish here, but when we walk out into the parking lot and throughout our day, we live in a Jewish way.
And I do have a couple of copies left of my book, both the Sacred Table and my second book, The Sacred Exchange, Creating a Jewish Money Ethic. They're for sale outside.
Okay, just a few closing remarks because I'm fading fast. Most importantly, I'd like to deeply thank Rabbi Zamore for such a wonderful, informative, and thought-provoking program. It stimulated great discussion and really helped deepen our understanding of the history and meaning of our Jewish values and how it shapes our dietary practices and other practices of our lives. Maddie and I would also like to thank the following members of our Adult Education Committee who helped make today's program possible. And that's Sheila Sachs, Ellen Rubenstein, Margie Wald, Blanchard Hyatt, and Susan St. Leifer. And thank you to Rabbi Edelman for handling the tech support and the microphone, especially. Oh, yeah. That's right. Thank you very much. And Cantor Clouseau for setting up our live stream link. Jordana Russo, Mark Grunsfelder, and Jackie Brustein for help with publicity. And we would sincerely like to thank any of you who've made contributions to our Adult Education Fund. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, before we leave, just a few highlights of our next exciting program, which will be The Jews of Broadway. It's a concert.